Imagine walking through the dry forests of India at night. You hear insects calling. The wind moves through the grass. But somewhere nearby is a bird that very few people have ever seen. It doesn't fly around in the open sky. It doesn't live in crowded cities. And for decades, scientists weren't even sure whether it was still alive. This mysterious bird is called the Jerdon's courser, a small, nocturnal bird that became one of India's greatest bird conservation mysteries. And its story is not just about a bird. It is about survival. The Jerdon's courser is a small ground-dwelling bird found in India. Its scientific name is Rhinoptilus bituquatus. Unlike many birds that are active during the day, the Jerdon's courser is primarily nocturnal. That means it becomes active after darkness falls. It spends much of its time walking or running along the ground rather than flying long distances. Its body is adapted to life in dry scrub and open woodland. The bird has a distinctive appearance, with a combination of brown, white and darker markings that help it blend into its surroundings. And that camouflage is extremely useful because this bird is incredibly difficult to find. The mystery begins. The story of the Jerdon's courser is extraordinary. The bird was first described scientifically in the 19th century. But as the years passed, sightings became extremely rare. Eventually, the Jerdon's courser disappeared from the scientific record for many decades. People began to fear the worst. Had this mysterious bird become extinct? For years, nobody had a clear answer. Then came an incredible discovery. In 1986, the Jerdon's courser was rediscovered in Andhra Pradesh. A bird that many people feared had vanished forever was still alive. This rediscovery immediately attracted the attention of conservationists and bird researchers around the world. But finding the bird was only the beginning. One of the biggest threats facing the Jerdon's courser is habitat loss. The bird depends on specific dry scrub and grassland habitats. But these landscapes have been changing. Agricultural expansion, development, changes in land use and other human activities can destroy or fragment the habitat the bird needs. And because the Jerdon's courser is so specialized, even changes to its environment can have serious consequences. Another problem is its secretive lifestyle. It is mainly active at night. It spends much of its time close to the ground. And its natural camouflage makes it extremely difficult to spot. So researchers cannot simply walk into the forest and count hundreds of these birds. Finding even one can be a major achievement. A bird of the night. Imagine trying to study a bird that comes out mainly after sunset, moves quietly across the ground, and disappears into vegetation when disturbed. This is the challenge faced by researchers studying the Jerdon's courser. Instead of relying only on traditional observation, conservationists have used technologies such as camera traps and other monitoring techniques to understand the species and determine whether it is still present. Every piece of evidence matters. Every sighting matters. Because when a species has such a tiny known population, researchers need to understand exactly where it lives and what threats it faces. Where does it live? Sk. 3745. The Jerdon's courser is associated with dry scrub habitats in Andhra Pradesh, particularly in the eastern Ghats region. Its habitat may not look spectacular compared with India's famous forests. There are no towering evergreen trees. No massive mountains covered in dense vegetation. Instead, there are dry landscapes, scrub grasses and scattered trees. But to the Jerdon's courser, this seemingly ordinary landscape is home. This is an important lesson in conservation. A habitat doesn't have to look extraordinary to be extremely valuable. Sometimes a simple patch of scrub can be the difference between survival and extinction. Dear, why do is this bird matter? 745 nansens. You might wonder, why should we care about one small bird that most people have never seen? Because every species plays a role in its ecosystem. The disappearance of one species can be a warning sign that an entire habitat is under pressure. The Jerdons corso is also part of India's natural heritage. For generations, these landscapes have supported unique plants and animals. When a species disappears, we don't simply lose an animal. We lose part of the natural history of our country. And once a species is gone forever, there is no way to bring back the original population. The fight for survival. Conservation efforts have focused on protecting the bird's remaining habitat and understanding its population. Researchers and conservation organizations have worked to monitor the species and identify the threats affecting it. Protected areas and habitat management can provide important protection. But conservation is not simply about creating a protected area on a map. The habitat must remain suitable. Human activities must be managed carefully. And researchers need reliable information about the species. For an animal this rare, conservation is a race against time. The bigger message. The story of the Jerdons corso teaches us something important. Sometimes extinction doesn't happen suddenly. A species can slowly disappear from places where it once lived. Its habitat becomes smaller. Its population becomes fragmented. Sightings become less frequent. And eventually, people may forget that the species was ever there. The Jerdons corso survived that story. It disappeared from view for decades. And then it was found again. But its future still depends on whether we can protect the world it needs to survive. Endangered. Today, the Jerdons corso remains one of India's most mysterious and threatened birds. A bird that prefers darkness. A bird that stays close to the ground. A bird that can disappear into the scrub almost as if it was never there. But somewhere in the dry landscapes of India, the story of this remarkable bird continues. The question is, will future generations be able to see the Jerdons corso in the wild? Or will they know it only from photographs, books and documentaries? That answer depends on what we do today. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel for more documentaries about India's rare and endangered wildlife. And remember, sometimes the smallest and most hidden creatures have the biggest stories to tell.